over-reliance on cars and private vehicles, which results in increased traffic congestion, air pollution, contributes to climate change, and also to decreasing levels of activity as people move towards, or have moved towards, driving and away from walking, away from taking public transport. In 2005, more than 20% of all CO2 emissions in the UK came from cars and trucks on the road, as well as from an emissions perspective. Main car drivers are found to walk only half the distance and for half the time as people who don't own a car in their household. One of the main barriers that's known to stop people switching to cycling is that they feel unsafe on the road because there's too much traffic. And in 1995, the RAC in a study found that only 20% of car journeys were necessary and unavoidable, and that 20% were of marginal value and really just probably for convenience more so than for necessity. As well as that, a significant portion of journeys are short, so they're under 2 miles, so they're not necessary car journeys. They could be walked, they could be cycled. As well as the obvious efforts of changing the environment, the built environment and infrastructure, there is a significant need to change behaviour, and there needs to be some comprehensive action around that. So the solution that I would propose would be to implement a local car free day scheme. And rather than say the National Car Free Day activities that say, you know, Monday the 26th is going to be National Car Free Day, don't take your car that day, to enable people to have some choice in which day they decide not to take a car. So if you joined the local Car Free Day scheme, you would nominate which day you're not going to take a car. You'd be sent a sticker that you could put in your car window that says, I'm a no car free day person on a Tuesday. And then for joining the Car Free Day scheme, you'd be given a number of benefits and a number of incentives. But to go with that, there'd be a number of disincentives. So there'd be a bit of a push to move people towards the Car Free Day scheme, as well as a bit of a pull to draw people in. So one of the incentives for joining the scheme perhaps would be that a significant proportion of the public car parking in the town, so if we use Reading as an example where we could implement this, if the council were to nominate a majority of the car parking spaces as Car Free Day parking spaces, so if you're not on the Car Free Day scheme, you can find a park, you can pay the usual fees, but it's quite difficult to find a park because there's only 20% of the parks that were there are now available. And if you're a Car Free Day scheme member, then you've got access to as many parks as you'd like. As well as that, there could be incentives around local rates, say concessionary rates on public transport to encourage you out of your car. Some of the bigger things that I'd like to look at is a way of perhaps not just using this as a very local small scheme, but eventually driving it to a larger scale scheme, would be to work with car insurance companies who currently do things around, you know, if you don't drive your car after midnight and 5 a.m, you can get specific discounts on your car insurance, and you can have a sticker in your car that allows the police to identify your car and stop and pull it over if you're driving, if it's on the road after that time. So they're obviously up for discounts and incentives. It's obvious in the way health insurance companies have added some discounts into their insurance premiums for people that regularly do exercise and join gyms and things. Equally, there's a possibility of going down the car tax discount route in the same way that you can get discounts on car tax by driving a long-mission vehicle. If you're a 6 out of 7 day a week driver, there should be no reason that you can't get a car tax discount from that point of view as well. And I think we'd need to obviously look at more immediate rewards that people can get as well. So I'd propose having something similar to the London Bike Hire Scheme fob that you've registered for, and you take your fob with you, try and get a sponsor on board such as Tesco or Sainsbury, and actually if you could get more nectar points if you're a Car Free Day member than if you're not a Car Free Day member, then you're able to get and pull rewards in on a regular basis. As well as that, there's a number of opportunities around signing up groups, cycle clubs and things that might be able to give cycle training for people to open up another alternative to get them out of their car, and offer those to people who are members of the scheme as well. The main aims really would be to decrease congestion, decrease air pollution, decrease the effect the emissions have on climate change, to decrease inactivity and obesity, and to improve the environment for cycling and walking. Obviously, there are a large number of resources that would be needed in this, but I would see it as, rather than a small step, something that would be a big step towards making a sort of a large behavioural change initially in one particular area and then growing outside of that. So from a resources point of view, there need to be significant engagement, obviously, with local authorities, with voluntary sector and charity groups, as well as with potential partners who might be involved from the commercial sector, looking at ways that they can gain in terms of sponsorship and marketing. There would also be a large need for input from the sort of communications team to raise the profile of this, from marketing, for a kick-off event, that kind of thing. And then there'd be some funding required to administer the scheme and to set it up in the first place, and then potentially to run it. There is obviously some appetite and interest from the local authority in Reading to decrease journeys on the road, which is shown by their support of the Lift Share, National Lift Share Week, which is the 4th to the 8th of October. And alongside that, they're actually running a Reading car share scheme, which would work in alignment very well with the Car Free Day scheme, and they could then run that on a yearly, regular basis to keep promotion of it. Being a fairly sort of significant project, I don't have a time frame over which this could be set up, but initial steps would be engagement with the local authority colleagues, with voluntary sector and with prospective partners. And then the key thing would be around reviewing evidence and data that's available on the local population, the demographics of drivers, what the reasons and purposes for their journeys are, how many of them are actually unavoidable, what the barriers to shifts from car use to either public or active modes of transport is, what the local public transport services are, where they run, where they don't run, what the problems are with them, and if there have been other schemes either nationally or internationally that have been run similar to this, what barriers they've come across, what the lessons learned from those are, and how we'd be able to overcome those, as well as if there's any evidence around incentives to decrease car use, because we know that there's only a small amount of evidence around what incentivises people for behaviour change around health, and to see if there is anything more from a transport point of view on that. And then obviously to prepare a detailed cost proposal and implement the scheme from there.
Have you any idea where the main source of funding would come from, or would you need public sector start-up and then hope to get insurance companies? Or?
Yeah, that would be the main thing. Would be a large proportion would be public sector funding, and part of the detailed cost proposal would be to look at where that can be offset and where savings could be made down the line from things like a significant portion of car journeys taken off the road, from hopefully fewer accidents, from less traffic congestion and less measures around traffic congestion needed, greater cycle safety, all of those sorts of things that could be done from it. And I would hope to try and get some sort of large degree of sponsorship in, and it would just be a case of trying to understand how you could maximise that, whether it's by having a car scheme card that's branded with your particular sponsor on it, or whether there's a way of having on car free scheme day car parks, having a sort of a stand that's got the sponsor's name on it, so it's clear this is a car free day scheme park, and also it's sponsored by Sainsbury's or Hoovers. I think Barclays is probably taken by that. So.
The simplicity of the idea is very attractive, actually. I'm quite astonished it hasn't been taken up already. But I've been racking my brains to look at the downside of this. Can you think of any sort of objections that people would have?
I think a number of objections would be people have become so reliant on cars, and out of, not necessarily always out of necessity, but out of convenience and out of habit. And I think there'd be a large, I can't not take my car because I have to do X, Y, and Z. There's also, I think, would probably be some kickback if you did make, for example, car parking in town only available to car park scheme members. You'd get kickback from businesses saying, well, actually you're deterring people from our door, and Sainsbury's out on the motorway have got free parking, so it's just going to go out there, which is why you need to work with businesses around that as well.
So it's a total play sort of approach.
I think it would need a total play sort of approach, and I think provided you could get if you could get the out of town places to actually implement it as well, and the benefit for them would be that they might be pushing more people to take up their online delivery service, which is something they're trying to do anyway, because they don't want to have all that space that they have to pay for and all those staff and stocking the shelves and what have you. So I think those would be some of the big benefit would be in changing people's perception of the opportunities and ways that they can travel without taking their car.
Yeah. Well, okay. One question. I mean, they've, for other reasons, implemented schemes of this nature elsewhere in Europe. I think Athens has a similar kind of system set up for entirely different reasons. Have you gleaned any evidence as to what the impact of that is?
I haven't.
Because,
No.
I mean, from a lay perspective, it seems there are as many positives as there are negatives in terms of congestion, at least.
Okay. No, I haven't looked at any of the evidence. The only evidence I'm aware of, or the only other type of scheme I'm aware of internationally, is that back in the 1970s there was a national car-free day, compulsory car-free day scheme in New Zealand because of petrol shortages. And so I sort of think if it's possible to implement it nationally, compulsory, then surely it's possible to implement it locally as a voluntary take-up, provided you provide a significant enough motivation for people and alternatives, and encourage them into those alternatives. What you may find then, actually, you push them into those alternatives and they start taking the car 5 days a week, not 6 days a week, even though they could take the car more often. I think the key is not just to look at the emissions and the congestion, but to look at the benefits on physical activity. As soon as people start taking the bus, they have to walk to the bus stop, they have to walk at the other end. If the bus doesn't come, they might walk anyway. So you're getting benefits across the board as well.
Can I just ask how you enforce it?
Sorry?
How are you going to enforce it? How you stop people from just taking their badge off when they want to take their car out on a Tuesday?
It's similar to like a car tax disc, really. So if you have one of those discs that once you put it on, you can't get it off. Well, if you get it off, you can't put it back on again. So you'd need to have a significant benefit attached to having that car-free day scheme, which, as I said, would be parking in town. So if you don't have your badge and your sticker, you can't find a park because you have to have your badge. And I would penalise it. I'd penalise it to the extent that traffic wardens penalise people for parking in London. So not a paltry 10 quid, but £100 unless you pay within 2 weeks. So significant. But I would also look to give people a 2-month window where once they join the scheme, if they get penalised for having their car out that day, they're allowed to write in and say, actually, I'm within my 2-month window and I'm still finding alternative routes, because people do plan things in advance. If they then joined the scheme and then thought, oh God, I've booked to go to whatever on a Thursday, and it's very difficult to get there on public transport, it would allow them that sort of window of opportunity to reorganise their life and pick alternative transport options.
A general thought is that, I mean, if you spoke to many car users, I guess their attitude towards national policy on this would be that it's imbalanced towards punitive rather than enabling approaches. This would be, I guess, at heart another punitive measure. Have you any thoughts above and beyond the project you suggested about whether that balance needs to shift, or whether attitudes of drivers need to shift?
When you say punitive, do you mean that it's? I mean, it would be. What I'd be aiming to do would be to offer significant incentives to join, that not joining becomes the worst choice. And again, because you choose which day of the week you can do it. It's not saying on a Monday you have to not take your car. So you've still got some degree of choice over when you would go pick a car-free day, and perhaps you might have options within the course of a year that you can actually change that date up to twice if your work schedule or something changes. So I would think it's only punitive if you join up and then don't play by the rules. Other than that, people have got the choice, and it takes into account the fact that people that live in rural areas don't necessarily have the ability to go car-free, because getting somewhere is, for example, getting into Oxford, if you live in the middle of South Stoke, it's probably quite difficult. But actually the fact that you would be able to get into if it was run, for example, and only, one option might be to have it only enforced in urban areas, then you could bring your car into Park and Ride, leave it there, and then you take the bus from there if you needed to.